How is it that you say that a person who is known to be as successful as any businessman can get, Steve Jobs, is not as smart as people think he is? I mean, that is something which can be very controversial. So, what is it that you have to say on that?
Yeah. Steve Jobs was very smart in the sense that he was brilliant at marketing. He was very aggressive with people. He managed to get plenty of people to work really hard on his projects and believe in his vision. He was very, very smart in those things. At the same time, plenty of people would be hard-pressed to talk about his failures. So if people who are watching this video can pause this video and write down at least one major failure of Steve Jobs, I'm sure plenty of people would come up with nothing. If you go and ask your friends, hey, do you know what Steve Jobs was successful for? Plenty of people will say, yeah, he made the iPod, he made the iPad, he made the iPhone. Plenty of people know about that. And you ask them, can you tell me even one major failure of his? Plenty of people would have no clue about that.
Right.
Because very few people look beyond the surface. If you read about Steve Jobs, if you specifically read his biography by Walter Isaacson, you will see that he has had lots of failures. And I just want to talk about two major failures. The first, which some people I'm sure would know, was that he was kicked out of Apple. He started Apple and he was kicked out of Apple by the board of directors. That's like the ultimate failure, right? You start a company, you put your tears, sweat and blood into that company for several years. You're known as the face of the company. You're like the visionary for the company. You're the driving force behind that company, and you have to leave the company. That, in my view, and I'm sure plenty of businessmen would agree, is a massive, massive failure. I mean, how could you allow yourself to be fired that way? How could you not guard yourself and enough to be in that position? After Apple, Steve Jobs started a company called Next. He spent about $100,000 just designing the logo of Next. But the company was a failure. Okay, so think about it. Here's a guy who manages to do well in Apple. He doesn't know much about technology. The technology brain in Apple was a guy called Steve Wozniak, his partner. So Next, in a way, is a company where, to some extent, he is more responsible for than Apple, because Apple's got Steve Wozniak. So Next is more like his individual outfit, and he failed it. So these are just two big failures. There are lots of other failures that are documented in Walter Isaacson's book and by other observers. And one of the other things was that Steve Jobs was just an asshole in real life. He had very bad manners. He insulted lots of people for no good reason. His daughter's just come out with a biography, and there are some very, very uncharitable things mentioned there as well. So again, I personally would look at that as a very, very big failure, and I'm sure plenty of other people would too. So what is the point? It's not that I'm trying to look down upon Steve Jobs. This is not a Steve Jobs busting session. The general point I'm trying to make is that most of these guys who people think are so successful, plenty of people think of them as supernatural human beings, as if they hardly made any major errors in their lives. And I'm trying to dispel that notion. I'm saying the media decides, let's target this guy and let's keep on talking about his successes and let's not talk about his failures. And for some personalities, they do just the opposite. They want to just ruin those guys, and they keep on talking about their failures and not about their successes.
Whatever that gets the attention in the media, or
maybe somebody's just got a good PR department and the other guys don't have a good PR department, or they don't pay off the press. So various reasons for that. The point is that that's true of not only very, very successful people, they're not as smart as you think they are, but you, who's watching this video, are not as smart as you think you are. And that's not an opinion. That is a research-backed statement. There is a lot of research, and it's known by various names. It's called the self-serving bias, or the Dunning-Kruger effect, or the Lake-Wobegon effect, which has lots and lots of reams of data to prove that people are not as smart as they think they are. So, what's the point of this all? This is not a negative thinking session. I hate motivational speakers, but that doesn't mean that I'm here to spread negativity and gloom. The point is to do something concrete about it. And one of the easiest ways in which people can become smarter is by, first of all, realizing that their brains are limited. If people like Steve Jobs, people like Donald Trump, whom we spoke about in the last video, had cognitive limitations, and you think that they are really smart people, then you should be even more willing to accept that you can have cognitive limitations. And the best way to overcome cognitive limitations is by using mental tools. And again, this is, like all our videos, is based in hardcore research. There is a gentleman called James Flynn, who is an intelligence researcher, and he's got a theory, again, very well backed up. It's called the Flynn effect. The Flynn effect says that every generation of Homo sapiens, right since the evolution of Homo sapiens, is smarter than the previous generation. Okay, so there's no magic taking place. It's just that every generation has mental tools that the previous generation did not have. Right? So our generation had calculus maybe 100 years ago, maybe 200 years ago. Nobody knew about calculus because it wasn't discovered or invented then. So if you have concepts like calculus, if you have concepts like ratio proportion, if you have concepts like linear notes, when language was evolving, there were certain generations which did not have linear notes. They only had oral communication. So if you use linear notes versus oral communication, you tend to do a better job. You tend to have a repository of thoughts and ideas to access, and that obviously makes you more intelligent. And mind mapping is another mental tool that plenty of people can use to have better thinking. So tools really make a lot of sense because they're portable. You are at a proficiency level here in a task. You use a tool and your proficiency level immediately goes up here. Okay, maybe it has some long-term impact, maybe it doesn't. That's secondary. In plenty of cases, it does have long-term impact, but that's secondary. The important point is you're immediately going from here to here. So if there is a guy who needs to do maths, he's not very good at maths, he needs help in maths, you can send him to a maths tutor, let him study maths for 3 to 4 hours a day for 70 years and hope he gets better. But most people don't have the time to do that. So they just use a calculator or an Excel sheet and they're able to do calculations in a far, far better way. So mental tools really make a huge, huge difference and you get results very, very fast. Now, the thing is, why is this video necessary? I'm sure there are plenty of people who are aware of mental tools. There are plenty of people who are not aware, that's fine, but there are plenty of people who are aware of mental tools who are not using mental tools because there's a cultural bias against using mental tools.
And why do you say that?
It's not macho. It's like if you take support, you're presumed as not smart. And in this case, it is absolutely stupid to presume that you're smart. Right? If you are going for a meeting, it makes a lot of sense for you to keep a pen and paper handy with you. In fact, David Allen, the greatest productivity guru in the world, the inventor of the GTD system, says you should have a pen and paper with you 24/7. You have any thoughts, it's best to just dump your thoughts on paper because if you think you're going to remember all the important thoughts that you had, it's just not going to work. And plenty of people enter meetings thinking that they will not only remember everything, they will not only understand everything and all, but they'll also remember everything that was discussed in the meeting. It just doesn't work. And that's why meetings are such a a humongous waste of time. In fact, there was an article in The Economist which said that the meetings are killing people's productivity. They are the bane of corporate life. I don't think meetings are the bane. If it's an important thing, then you need to meet. If you need to meet 10 times a day, then you meet 10 times a day if it's important. But you can't run those meetings inefficiently. So just a simple thing like a pen and a paper for a meeting is an absolutely critical, an absolutely wonderful mental tool that many people are not using. So the crux of it is we are encouraging you to use mental tools. We're saying, please don't join the fools. Use mental tools.